name is Antonio Grate, and this is my Broken Not Dead story.
I'm broken not dead.
One Saturday afternoon, I was with my friends. I was probably around 7, 8 years old, and we were playing in a vacant lot. We were playing tackle football at that. And it was crazy because during the game, man, the main thing I was concerned about was not getting hurt. I'm like, we're not getting paid for this, so I'm not about to really get hurt messing around with you guys, right? And the game was over. I made it out in one piece, and as we was exiting that vacant lot, one of the young ladies that was with us, who always seemed to hang with us, she said something to me after I must have said something to her or to someone else. And she said these words. She said, "That's why your mama is a crackhead." And at that moment, it felt like everything in my world started to crumble. And how you know is because even at that moment, we were walking, I stopped walking, and I began to cry. Like tears just began to fall out from my eyes, down my face, like a river. And at that moment, everything in me felt like it started to break. She began to apologize as much as possible. It didn't help. What was said was said. And at that very moment, my perspective on my life and the world that I was living in drastically began to change because my mom was a crackhead. See, man, I grew up in the inner city of Chicago, man. I grew up in the ghetto of Chicago, right? And I grew up in a period where it's kind of crazy because right now we're experiencing a pandemic, right? But I grew up in a drug epidemic. I'm an 80s baby, man. And one thing about growing up in the inner city, growing up in the ghetto of Chicago is that we are quite aware of what we call crackheads. We are very aware of what we call fiends. And in that environment, we know that a fiend or a crackhead isn't anything to be excited about. We know that that isn't anything to bring honor to anyone. It was a bad look. And for my mom, man, the love of my life, you know what I'm saying, to find out that way, that she was a crackhead, man, my world went spiraling, bro. You know, it was a day I never forget. It's a day I never forget. My mom was in the situation that she was in. Shortly after she got into that situation, I began to live with my grandparents. And the cool thing about this, my grandparents might have lived like a block and a half from my mom. And I lived with my grandparents. But when my grandmother died around 9 is when all of a sudden my life took a whole nother turn. And at a quick moment, all of a sudden I knew that my grandfather was telling me to pack my bags. I'm going to live with my cousin. I'm going to live with my aunt. And I didn't know them, but all I knew is I was about to be removed from the one family that I've always known. And that was another drastic moment for me where I had to change and adapt. And it was tough. I felt rejected. I felt neglected. I had a lot of questions of why. I didn't feel love, you know, and I just couldn't understand what was really happening because now I'm living with strangers. Yes, they're family, but to me, they're strangers. And I'm forced to go to different schools. I'm now living in a different neighborhood. I'm in a whole new environment, and it was a big adjustment for me. And at the same time, too, it was kind of embarrassing because I knew why I was with, I didn't know, but I had an idea why I was with them because, listen, my mom's situation. And now I'm staying with my aunts and uncles, man, and it was a part of me that was embarrassed because I didn't really want anybody to ask me, why am I with my cousins or why I'm with my aunt? Why I'm not with my parents? I didn't want anybody to ask that because I didn't want to have to answer that question. Because it was just embarrassing. It was tough for me. But I didn't enter into the foster care system officially until I was around the age of 15. And how that happened was, man, I was actually crazy. I was actually staying with my mom at this point. I went back to live with my mom. And what ended up happening was my mom ended up giving birth to my sister. But upon giving birth, drugs was found in her system. And when that happened, then DCFS became involved in the situation. And all of a sudden, you know what? Now I got caseworkers showing up at the house. And now I'm being entered into the foster care system for the first time. And I actually aged out the foster care system. I went in around 15 and I aged out around 21, you know. And that was interesting too, you know, but at the same time, I can honestly say that it was a blessing in that. And the blessing was I was actually getting some much needed support that I personally needed at that moment and at that time. And I had a wonderful social worker. I remember her name like it was yesterday, Renee Hurd. You know, she was like a mother to me, man. She was awesome. She was amazing. And I valued her insight and her willing to care for me and assist me any way, shape that she could. Though technically I was into the foster care system at age 15, I almost felt like I was into the foster care system at the age of 9, or maybe even before that, because you got to think about it. Shortly after I turned 1 or so, I was taken from my mom, then with my grandparents, age 9, then with my aunts, and then at 15, removed from my mom. Now I'm staying with other kinships, which is what the kinship care is, what they call in the foster care system, which is my grandfather. I left my mom and went back with my grandfather for a period of time. Then my grandfather got diagnosed with cancer. He died. Then guess what happens? Then I'm living somewhere else again, but who I'm living with a friend of mine and his family. Thankfully, they were willing enough to take me in for my last year and a half or so of high school. So I lived with them for a year and a half of high school. Then I go to college. I'm living on my own. So when I come back, I really don't have a place to call home. So guess who opened up their doors to me? My basketball coach from high school. He opened up his doors to me, allowed me to stay there with him for the summer. And then I had a brother. Then one summer, he let me stay there, sleep on the couch and things of that nature, until eventually I was able to get an internship. And doing an internship, it provided housing to where I can stay and work and things of that nature. So it was a lot of moving and shaking, but my experience in the foster care system was cool. It wasn't a technically terrible experience because I was still staying with family members. I was in kinship care, which is another form of foster care, but also it's a form that social workers or the foster care system really try to put kids in instead of putting them in group homes or putting them with family they don't even know or people they don't even know. Man, I had a lot of internal struggles. You know, one struggle that I remember having was anger. Because I was feeling some type of way about my situation and it had me responding in a negative way. And being at that age and at that time, I didn't know necessarily why I was responding the way I was. I didn't understand why I had trouble managing my anger, but it's because I had a lot of things going on the inside of me. And during those transition periods, it was a challenge because it felt like it was always an uphill battle. It felt like it was always a challenge that I was faced with that I had to try to get over and act as though everything was okay. And that part is, I think, a part that a lot of people struggle with, acting as though everything is okay when internally everything isn't okay. And that's a big point of mine when I go speaking to kids and speaking to those in the foster care system, because I understand what it feels like to be broken on the inside, to have these internal struggles, to have these internal challenges, but yet you're expected to act as though everything is all right. That's what I want to speak to. I strive to speak to what's going on the inside to help those individuals to better understand what they're dealing with and what they're feeling on the inside. Because I believe if you can begin to understand that, if you can begin to get the victory over that, then everything else that's happening in your environment, you will begin to win in that. Because I want individuals to win. Yes, I was broken. Yes, I went through some traumatic situations, but I'm standing here today because I realized how I overcame those things, and I want to share those tools and those skills of how I overcame those things and impart it to this generation and to the next generation so that ultimately they can win from the inside out. Like, I'm a fighter, man. Kids in the foster care system, you're a fighter. Your level of tenacity, your level to face uncertainties and still keep going. Like, there's something to be said about that. Like, those are superhero strengths, right? Those are superhero capabilities. Those are superhero-like characteristics. But what it also showed me is that many kids in the foster care system begin to fall weak because one thing that starts to happen is they start to lose hope. Because of their situation, man, because of the trauma that they dealt with, because of the heartbreak, because they're not with their mom, because they're not with their dad, because they're living with strangers, because they're in group homes and they feel like no one really cares about them and different things of that nature, they start to lose hope. But be grateful. The one thing that you could be grateful for is literally a message of hope. And why is that a message of hope? Why is that my motto? Why is that my tagline? Because I remember when I was in a hopeless situation. I remember when I was ready to give up on everything, bro. I remember, bro. And I'm telling you, man, when I found that one thing that I could be thankful for, when I found that one thing that I could be grateful for, man, that thing began to change my life because it gave me something to look forward to. It gave me something to fight for, bro. You know what I'm saying? And that one thing was my grandmother, man. And all of that, I felt like she loved me, man. And I began to live for her. I began to fight for her, man. And when I began to do that, man, it just began to strengthen me. It began to remove the clouds and the darkness that I felt like was over my life and I felt like was on my shoulders. And because of that, man, I began to fight strong. I began to fight harder than I ever had before in my life. It helped me to keep going. It gave me something to look forward to. And then what I began to realize is that I didn't like me. I didn't think I was worth anything. But what being grateful showed me was, man, listen, I'm important. I'm valuable. And I began to love myself, man. And as you know it, I began to fight and love myself. So I'm no longer giving up. I'm pushing forward. And ultimately, I started winning, man. I started winning in them situations that should have been taking me out. That's why Be Grateful means so much to me. Because I want kids to remember. I want people to remember. Identify that one thing. Out of all the negativity that you're dealing with, out of all the negativity that's surrounding you, identify that one thing and hold on to that thing. Keep that thing tucked close to your heart. Think about it each and every day. Talk about it each and every day. Remind yourself about it each and every day. And watch that one thing propel you past everything that's trying to stop you.